Contemplate the universe as a magic show on the grandest scale imaginable. Fabulous art and immense painting in motion. God is a magician, whirling galaxies of fire, juggling atoms, particles, and us. Everything. Everything is fleeting. Meditating on this magic, great happiness rises in the heart. Salutations from space, folks. This is Gemini Brett, astronaut of more than astrology and celestial navigator of the StarryTelling podcast, here to dive into a month's worth of astrology to honor Venus as she descends through the Crown Gate. Inanna moving through that first gate on her way into the Kur, the underworld, where she has to remove her crown. So first gate on the way down, really the seventh gate because it correlates to the seventh chakra, the crown. So you just heard a radiant sutra. My friend Melanie handed me that sutra at the Yoga Festival earlier this month, I guess it was last month, and said, "This is your sutra." And this comes from the Radiance Sutras, translations of ancient texts by Lauren Roche, which was edited by my friend Melanie, who we will certainly have on at some point to talk about that process and what the Radiance Sutras are. One thing I love, she just gave me this book last week, is that the original edition had this image of the Venus transit, right? And I can tell this is June of 2004 just by where Venus is seen in front of the sun. That happened again in 2012, a Venus transit. It won't happen again while we are living in these bodies. Okay, a month worth of Venus. Well, that's a tall task for sure. So we'll see how the planets guide this, and I thought maybe we could start with a bit of teacup tarot. That's how I like to start readings, and in a sense this is a reading for Venus herself. So we'll choose one cup for you, and you will be playing the part of Venus here, I guess, at the tea table today. And your cup is Jupiter. It's almost like I set that one up, but this time I didn't. For me, Mars. Interesting. Jupiter and Mars, and we'll pick a cup for Spirit here. Chiron. All right, Jupiter, Mars, and Chiron to talk about Venus. So I've been doing these moon game videos for almost the past year, and almost every month I've missed some, to look at the month of astrology as it unfolds with the principal phases of the moon during the course of the month or the month. And I'm shifting now to honor the month. It's roughly a month between the Venus gates, or Venus descending through the chakras. But first, tea. Drinking a old pu'er to keep this thing a little bit lively. And pu'er as well to honor where Venus is coming from. So by now, if you're watching this, you most likely have seen some of the episodes of the 13th Flower, and you know that this project, the 13th Flower, is a devotion to Venus in this 19-month cycle in her investigation of the Leo mysteries, the sovereign scepter of the lioness. But she comes from Capricorn. She was born in Capricorn either January 11th or January 17th, 2014, depending on the way that you look at the thing. And she did the Capricorn study until her recent rebirth in the sign of Leo in August of 2015. Now, pu'er really holds an essence of Capricorn for me, because it's the mother of all teas. It's a different plant than the modern tea plant that we drink. It only grows in one place in China, and it's deeply rooted. Some of these plants have grown to tree size, and the process is to age this tea. The old process is to age the green leaves until they ferment and turn black. And in many of the traditions, they will actually take these cakes that they form and store it out under the full moon every month or something like this. I mean, of course, if we were creating a pu'er right now, we would put it out for these Moon-Venus conjunctions, Nana descending through the gates. So pu'er really holds this Capricorn resonance for me. It also holds the resonance of Aquarius, because here we have these deep-rooted trees, Capricorn, but they're bathing in the starlight, you know, this kind of Aquarius energy. And in the old traditions, before Uranus was discovered, Aquarius, like Capricorn, was Saturn's territory. And Saturn, I feel, is in many sense a representative of where Venus has come from, completing her Capricorn study. And I think pu'er is a really wonderful tea for us to make sure that we are grounded in the traditions, in the roots of Venus's, and therefore the Divine Feminine's, last full cycle as we move into this new cycle, which is still very new. So in review, you know, I'm hoping you've seen some of the last videos, but in review, well, today is September 16th, 2015, Wednesday, miércoles, Mercury's day, a wonderful time to talk about astrology because it's this fella, Mercury, who brought this art forth. But we'll go back to when Venus was conjunct the Sun, and that was August 15th, 2015, a month ago, in the 23rd degree of Leo. And as you've heard me say before, this was her conception point. Yeah? So, one interesting thing there is to read the Sabian symbol for that degree of the zodiac, which is, in a circus, the bareback rider displays her dangerous skill. I love this for Leo. And I'm going to get deep into birth chart analysis for Venus in this cycle another time. This video is devoted to this current month that began with the first Venus moon gate on September 10th. So, before we do though, I will say that this is the conception point. This is that interior conjunction point. This is Venus between the Earth and Sun, as close to the Earth as she gets, and being charged by the light of the Sun. This is a Nana visiting Enki to receive the Holy Me. But it's really about a week later when Venus separates herself by 10 degrees from the Sun, and then she can be seen in the morning sky. If she wasn't that morning, it was really the next day when she had reached 10 degrees from the Sun, August 22nd, and rose before the Sun did so that her light could be seen. And this is her heliacal rise. In a sense, we could say this is the Venus birth chart for this current Leo cycle. So when we bring the planets in to honor all of the alignments there, right, and that's something that, again, I'll be looking deeply into another time. But one thing I'm most amazed about is this trine alignment to Uranus. And it's not only Uranus, but Uranus is conjunct Eris at this time. They'll make 3 exact alignments in 2016. That hasn't happened since 1927. And that's a big part of this puzzle, the way that I feel into it. A beautiful note in this song. So I look forward to bringing more of that in later. And speaking of bringing more in, here are the principal asteroids that many astrologers, including myself, honor now. Vesta, the keeper of the sacred flame, retrograde in Aries. Juno, the asteroid goddess of relationship, For those of you who have studied the astrological arts, note that this is not the standard glyph for Juno. It's usually an asterisk on the cross of matter, but this is the one that Sky Engine uses. So know that this is Juno, currently in Virgo, and she was in Virgo too at that time of Venus's heliacal rising. Pallas Athena, goddess of wisdom, in Sagittarius, and Ceres, in a sense, Divine Mother, in Capricorn. And I love that because, again, Venus, who is now born in the sign of Leo, beginning a new synodic cycle, a new 19-month quest, well, she's coming from Capricorn. She reached that elder wisdom, that council of grandmothers, essence of the divine feminine in her Capricorn study. And Ceres is in a beautiful way reflecting this to us, at this time. And this held for the first Venus Moon Gate. So we will look to that. That was Thursday, September 10th, 2015. The exact alignment was 12:23 and 53 seconds in the AM of the Pacific Standard Time. So here in Seattle, just after midnight, at the very beginning, since we strangely begin our days at midnight on September 10th, Thursday, Jupiter's day. And so I love that you drew the Jupiter cup. In fact, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to take a drink from that one. Yum. And Jupiter, to me, is the essence of the Crown Chakra. I think I'll do one more little bit of review here. I'm going to take away everything but the Sun, the Moon, and Venus. And we're going to go back to the Venus conception on August 15th, Venus's interior conjunction to the Sun, which is actually the day after the Leo new moon of this year. If you watch the 4th episode of the 13th Flower, my conversation with Tammy Brunk, shamanic astrologer and co-founder of the Venus Alchemy Group, you'll have heard that Venus, Sun, and Moon are the 3 planetary bodies that we watch to honor the descent of Inanna through the 7 gates on her way into the underworld. So it's pretty cool that the Venus-Sun interior conjunction was just the day after the Leo new moon. And we're going to cruise this through. We'll go a week ahead to the Venus heliacal rising on August 22nd, when Venus could just be seen in the morning sky, rising before the Sun. She's still retrograde, which is shown as red numbers here in Sky Engine software. She's retrograde when she's interior conjunct the Sun, as I've shown in previous episodes, because this is Venus passing the Earth in our mutual orbits, giving the apparent motion of Venus retrograde in the sky. And it was September 6th when Venus went direct. So you'll see her numbers turn from red to black on September 6th, okay? And in many senses here, now that she has gone direct, she is chasing the Sun. She has begun her descent into the underworld, because when she gets so close to the Sun that she can no longer be seen, and she disappears for about 2 months' time, we imagine, the ancients would have imagined this as Venus descending into the underworld. And shamanic astrology then begins counting every crescent moon Venus conjunction thereafter as Inanna's descent into the underworld. There are typically about 7 of these before Venus disappears. This year, or this cycle, there will be 8 Venus Moon conjunctions. Moon-Venus conjunctions, to be astronomically correct, astrologically correct by nomenclature. And the first was September 10th, on Thursday. Now, I wrote a long post about this on the Facebook group, and you can read that there. about, is this indeed the descent through the first gate? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because one of my teachers, Gary Caton's method, is to not start clocking the gates until Venus reaches maximum brightness, which guarantees that there will only be 7 gates, as is true in the Inanna story. So shamanic astrology begins counting the gates when Venus moves direct, because zodiacally speaking, now she is moving ahead through the zodiac and therefore chasing the sun down. But when Venus stations, she in a sense stops in the constellations of the zodiac. This is true for all planets when they shift either from direct to retrograde or from retrograde to direct motion. The car analogy works well here. I mean, before you can put it in forward after you've been in reverse, you've got to stick it in park for a second. And what you'll notice, actually I'll play this through time a little bit, is that though Venus is now moving direct, right, black numbers, she's still separating herself from the sun, right? She's basically hit park, and therefore the sun is moving faster than her. I'm going to move forward by days so you can see this. And what I want you to notice is just that the distance between Venus and Sun is still increasing. This will happen until October 25th this year, which is Venus's maximum height in the morning sky. She reaches maximum brightness before that. But you can see how she's distancing herself. And then she picks up speed and starts moving faster than the Sun. So this gate here on October 9th, I want to say that is when in the heroine's journey, Gary Caton's system, that he starts counting the Crown Chakra Gate. Now, what I've done is to merge the two systems, shamanic astrology, Daniel Gemario and Kaylin Castell, which begins the first gate as soon as Venus goes direct, and that was September 10th. And Gary Caton's system, the heroine's journey, which begins after Venus reaches maximum brightness, which would say the first gate is what shamanic astrology calls the second gate, or 7th chakra, at what shamanic astrology honors as the 6th chakra. And the way that I'm merging these two systems is to say that, yes, on September 10th, with the crescent moon Venus conjunction, this was kind of opening the study of the crown chakra. And then when we hit the next gate in October, in early October, that's going to be the time to remove the crown, and we start focusing on the third eye chakra. Okay, so one thing you'll notice as this has been spinning is that it's about every month that the moon comes around to embrace Venus in the morning sky. We know this is morning because Venus is to this side of the sun, and here comes a moon-Venus conjunction. I'll speed this up. And it happens about every month, so that we get either 7 or 8, depending on the system, of these gates as Venus descends into the underworld, which begins when Venus pulls within 10 degrees of the sun. So a little bit of review there about how this whole thing happens. But what I really want to focus this video on, as I will every month, is these Venus moon gates. So in the shamanic astrology system, this one, October 8th, by the way, is the next gate we just saw. But this one, September 10th, okay, will be the Crown Chakra Gate. And so this begins for me in my own practice during this cycle, the study of the Crown Chakra. What is that thing? And what is it to remove the clutter from the Crown Chakra so we can move into this death and rebirth process, this reassemblage process? Because on the way down into the underworld, it's clearing the clutter from the crown down to the root, once a month about releasing the clutter, then 2 months of a reassemblage, and then as Venus is reborn in the western or the evening sky, it is taking back these energetic systems starting from the root and moving to the crown, and that will complete our Venus quest. So September 10th, 2015, I'm going to bring the planets back in here, and the node, and the asteroids with Chiron, and Eris. So there's a lot of points there, but you can see the decoder ring up here. So pause this at any point if you want to say, okay, wait, what's that strange glyph that I don't know? Well, that's Ceres. That's Pallas Athena, right? This is Eris. So I like to honor these asteroid goddesses. They bring a lot of the feminine mythology back into this song, back into this beautiful story that unfolds through astrology. And I love honoring Eris too, especially in this very dynamic alignment that she's sharing with Venus during this time. So we'll be getting into that more and more. I'm going to show you that though this gate, it was exact at 12:23:53 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, it's not until the next morning that we see this happening in our sky, right? So that was about, I saw it at 5 a.m. I'll put up a picture here. Venus, Moon, and Mars together. They made this beautiful triangle in the sky. So I love that one of the cups that we drew in our teacup tarot was Mars. And I love that we drew Jupiter as well. Because as I said earlier, in my own personal system of planetary associations with the energetic systems of the chakras, Jupiter represents Crown Chakra to me. Now there have been many such systems put forth over time. Some of the traditional systems have the sun and the moon at the crown. It's like where the Ida and the Pingala, the feminine and the masculine energies of the caduceus come together. But when I sat on this and I was working with the 7 traditional planets, okay, moon and sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, I started from the root up, and I was like, root red, okay, that's Mars, and it's like, whoa, no way. And I realized, wait a second, that is Saturn, right? We can unfold our legs when we sit in posture, and Saturn's rings will hold them up. And Saturn is this rooted energy, this earthly energy. So we'll be speaking a lot about Saturn as we move forward, and Saturn, as a representative of the Capricorn Mystery School, also talks to us about where Venus has come from, because her last synodic study was in the Capricorn Mysteries. And Saturn has some amazing alignments over the course of this Leo-Venus cycle. But for this month, this gate, for me it's Jupiter. Jupiter in so many ways represents the crown chakra, because it in a sense is our connection to spirit. Gas giant guru is one thing that I've called Jupiter. Traditionally Sagittarius and Pisces. Now if you look into medical astrology or the body associations of the planets, this is more Aries territory, the head, and some would say therefore Mars. And so my system does not agree with medical astrology's placement of the planets at the bodies. Some would say you shouldn't do planets in the chakras at all anyway, but you know, I'm a rather astrological fella if you didn't know this. And for me to enter a mystery, the unknown, something like the chakras, it's very helpful for me to have the planets guiding this process. And it makes a lot of sense to me for Jupiter to be there, because the crown chakra, as I understand it, is our connection to Source, to, I could even say, the celestial wisdom. And Jupiter in so many ways is the teacher of that. And so I love that this first gate, this Crown Chakra Gate, this beginning of the month of Crown Chakra study, so that we can release the clutter at the next gate, taking off the crown, it was on Thursday, This is Jupiter's day of the week, Thor's day. And also, and I was amazed to see this, that morning after I took a million pictures of Venus and the moon and Mars and sat for a long time and just meditated on this energy and asked Venus to come in as a teacher for me, I saw just moments later the heliacal rise of Jupiter. Now it said that Jupiter typically has to distance itself 12 degrees from the Sun. It's really the Sun distancing itself 12 degrees from Jupiter because the Sun moves faster than Jupiter. But it says that Jupiter has to be 12 degrees from the Sun to be seen, but I found that not to be true on this day. It was 11 degrees away, and I saw Jupiter rising just before the Sun. I was kind of shocked. I didn't expect it at all. I was like, wait, what is that light? I said, oh my gosh, that is Jupiter. And so it just warmed my heart that at this time of the Crown Chakra Gate, Jupiter, who for me represents Crown Chakra, was there, visible in the morning sky. In his new home of Virgo, because Jupiter spends about a year in every sign, the year king. And I think I'll get a lot more into that as we move forward in this 13th flower journey, because the year king talks about an old age of matriarchy. And the story is that the queen would select a king every year, or the men would compete for this title, and the winner would be king for a year, but only for a year, because at the end of that term he would be sacrificed, his blood given to the land to ensure a healthy harvest for the following year. So that's a pretty tough rap, and I think that essence really comes in Virgo, which in so many ways, and through that devotion and practice that's so available in the Virgo mysteries, it can be a rather sacrificial energy at times. And I'll be speaking more and more about that, especially next month, because Venus and the moon will align for the next gate in the sign of Virgo. Venus will ingress into Virgo just on the very last day of this Crown Chakra Gate. But this one began in Leo, as you can see, and she was conjunct Mars, right? They made an exact alignment on August 31st in the West Coast, September 1st in the East Coast. And they will travel together for some time. Venus is now beginning to separate herself, getting higher in the morning sky, but they're within a fist. If you stretch out your fist, that's 10 degrees, and that's good enough for jazz, or that's kind of the indicator of a planetary conjunction from a visible standpoint that shamanic astrology utilizes. All right, so here we go. This is, in many senses, the beginning, this rise of crescent moon embracing Venus in the morning sky with Mars right there and Jupiter's heliacal rising. And Jupiter does some very interesting things this month. In this Crown Chakra Gate, I mean, there's so many incredible alignments, so I better get to those. Perhaps the most significant during this month are two eclipses. We are in eclipse season, which happens twice a year when the sun approaches either the south node, as it did in April, or the north node, as it does this month. And so on September 12th, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this to a whole sign house system chart, because we're not so concerned with the rising sign. We want to keep this more universal to the many time zones. And the whole sign system, which just gives 30 degrees, right? Each sign has a house. This is the oldest system. This is what the Hellenistics used. So before I forward to this solar eclipse, this very significant event during this month, let's just look at some of the alignments. Venus, Moon, Jupiter together aligned in this trine to Uranus and Eris. think I will save that discussion for the proper Venus birth chart reading. Vesta, keeper of the sacred flame, in Aries and retrograde. Okay, getting very close to the earth. All right, so what is sacred is our independence, is the nature of the self, these burning fires of Aries, this pioneering spirit, this spark. Okay, how can we get to the Leo roaring flames if we don't have that spark to get the fire started? There's something sacred about taking gnosis of self and knowing that selfness is not selfishness in this Leo study. And I think as we're clearing the clutter of the Crown Gate, okay, rules, traditions, things like this, okay, from the last cycle even, there's something to saying that, yes, okay, the Council of Grandmothers, the Capricorn study, this is very much about the others, about the tribe. And now as we're coming into Leo, a service to self-growth sign, a fix yourself to fix the world, to fix the sign, we're showing that actually it is sacred, okay? In this trine from Vesta to Venus during the first gate, she's saying it's okay. All right, and to bring in medical astrology, Aries is said to be the head. So we do get to see that correlation coming forth. It's okay to focus on yourself. This is not selfishness. This is indeed sacred. And she's saying, remember when we knew that, yeah? Retrograde in Aries. And the South Node in Aries. Just in the last months of the South Node in Aries, which has been alive since February of 2014. On November 11th, 2014, the South Node will move into Pisces and the North Node will move into Virgo. Virgo becomes very key for this cycle, especially in the next month, the next gate. Other things we notice is that at this gate, who do we see opposed the Sun but Chiron? Alright, and that's really going to align at the time of the solar eclipse. And of course, that's the third cup we chose. Now, I'm not going to drink from that cup because that we chose for spirit. Though I think I will have another sip of your Jupiter tea, if you don't mind. Chiron in Pisces, alright, opposite the Sun in Virgo. And also Neptune in Pisces, opposite Jupiter in Virgo. Not quite exact yet, either of them, but that did happen during the course of this month. Is happening during the course of this month. Juno, asteroid goddess of relationship in Virgo, okay, on her way to meet the North Node in Libra. The North Node in Libra pulling the focus of our collective consciousness towards relationship. We see the 3 Venus-Mars conjunctions this year. As you might have heard me speak about, I'm seeing that as a commitment to rewriting our relationship to relationship itself. So I love that this is happening. I love that Juno and Jupiter are in the same sign of Virgo. They actually made conjunction in May of this year in Leo. Actually in these degrees of Leo. But Juno was the wife of Jupiter. And, you know, they didn't have such a healthy monogamous relationship because this fellow was, well, kind of sleeping with everything that moved, and she didn't like it that much. So in Virgo, they're asking what is sacred. And we can say, with Juno heading into Libra, which maybe is a sign that is most associated with her mysteries, to align to that North Node before it leaves Libra, there's a lot of focus here on what is sacred, Virgo, in the ways of relationship, Libra, and I think this is available in this Venus-Mars discussion that's been going down, and maybe you've heard me discuss that. You see Saturn, who is the only planet seen in the evening sky at this time, in the last degree of Scorpio. In fact, tomorrow, on September 17th, 2015, Saturn will ingress into Sagittarius to stay until 2018. So he is finishing his Scorpio chapter that has been alive for the most part since October of 2012. Tomorrow, September 17th, Mercury will also station retrograde. We're going to get to that. But first, Pallas Athena, wisdom in Sagittarius, trining Venus at this moon gate. All right. Now, we're talking about the wisdom cultivated through spiritual seeking, philosophy, the vision quest represented by Sagittarius, which traditionally was associated with Jupiter. Okay, so again, the mysteries of Jupiter at the Crown Chakra, which for me personally is the planetary association there, come to us in so many ways at this Venus moon gate. Ceres retrograde in Capricorn. I mentioned this before, but I love that as a representation of where Venus has come from. She's achieved the wisdom of the Council of Grandmothers. Ceres is retrograde, right? Remember where you come from. But there's also some gnosis of, okay, right, I hold that, that's my roots, but I compost that tree into the soil in which I plant my new Leo seeds. Also, Pluto in Capricorn. All right, and Pluto retrograde here in red will station during the course of this Crown Chakra Gate month. So we will see that happening. But before all that did, maybe the most significant event came to us just 2 days later, a solar eclipse in the sign of Virgo on September 12th, 2015. The exact time on the West Coast was 11:41 p.m. And this was something else. I mean, you can see here that the moon is conjunct sun, new moon in Virgo, right? They're close enough to the node, not that close, for this to be an eclipse. It was a very partial eclipse. New moon or full moon needs to be near the nodes, which is the place in the sky where the orbit of the sun and the orbit of the moon as seen from Earth cross, and therefore when we have a new moon or a full moon at those places, we have an eclipse. If they're not close, from our view, the moon's either going to be above or below the sun in the case of a new moon, or the shadow of the Earth above or below the moon in the case of a full moon. But this was close to the eclipse, close enough for a solar eclipse. Of course, this was not seen here in Seattle. It's 11:41 p.m., so the sun had set, but it was happening. And notice also how strongly aligned this Virgo solar eclipse was to Chiron. All right, how is this part of the Crown Gate study? Well, as I will show moving forward, and in a sense in the second episode, the conversation with Gary Caton, I mentioned how this Venus-Leo cycle came to us from the Virgo cycle. Now that can be confusing. I've said already, she just did Capricorn. What do you mean Virgo? I mean historically, the point of the Venus pentagram that is now in Leo and is enacted there every 8 years. It used to be in Virgo for about 100 years. I think it was 1871 until 1975, if we honor heliacal rise. That one of the Venus pentagram points, or five-petaled rose curves, was in the sign of Virgo for that whole time. This will be a major focus of the 13th flower journey sharings moving forward. But I love that there is this very strong attention to the Virgo archetype moving forward, shown by Jupiter spending his year in Virgo to begin this Venus quest, certainly shown by this solar eclipse in Virgo on September 12th. So what was your experience of this on September 12th? I mean, sometimes astrology is more fun in retrospect, in reflection, right? I'll tell you mine. I mean, I was fascinated by this because, you know, eclipses can be pretty wild times in the correspondences of how we feel these heavenly energies here on Earth. And not only was this a solar eclipse, but it was opposite Chiron, right? The Virgo-Pisces opposition. Also, the Virgo-Pisces opposition shown by Jupiter opposed Neptune here, all right? So for me, Virgo, which can be the very discreet, focusing on the details of the thing, keeping the temple tidy, this sacred devotion to the spiritual work, but it's kind of the microcosm of spirit. It's God is in every cell of my body. Where Pisces, on the other end, the polarity points, they always inform one another, right? Pisces is the up and out, the avant-garde, the mystical, and the macrocosm of spirit. I am but a single cell of the grand uni-being, to paraphrase the great Gurdjieff. Well, Chiron, okay, the sacred wound, the shamanic healer, the medicine man who wounded himself, dropped the poison arrow, in his own body poisoning himself, but through that developed so many different medicine modalities attempting to heal himself, and because he couldn't, he developed empathy and gave himself for the release of Prometheus, which is a long and beautiful story I'll tell you another time. But there's this kind of sacrificial energy going on here. I mean, Chiron in the Greco-Roman tradition is in some senses like the Jesus story, selfless sacrifice through this empathic giving that allowed him to reach the heavens. And that's a beautiful thing, but in its shadow it can be martyrdom, right? So there's something here about the shadow, okay? This is an eclipse, always, right? The shadow. Or in the sense of a new moon, the energy of the moon blocking out the fires of the sun. There's a strong emotional content to that. The moon often associated with the emotional body, the memories, the soul, this kind of thing, and the yin energies. Blocking the fire of the sun from us for a time, just a moment. And I had the most incredible experience of this at a festival I was at during the course of this moon. In fact, I had given a talk just hours before, and like at this time, or maybe an hour before, a man I hadn't met asked me, hey, I don't know so much about the Virgo archetype. Could you tell me about that? I said, sure, I'll share what I know of it, or what I feel into it, and that is priestess. That is this devotion to the sacred work, the earth work, honoring the cycles, the seasons, and being devout in the practice in one's own personal yoga. And I don't mean stretching. My yoga is speaking to the planets and bringing celestial conversation through terrestrial narration, And just then, at the sacred fire of the festival, which was not far away, this fight erupted. A man yelled, "You need to stop playing that!" He's like, "That brother is channeling the Earth Mother, and your mess is getting in the way of that beautiful Gaia harmony," or something to that effect. And in my conversation with this man who was asking about Virgo, I said, yeah, and that is the shadow of this thing. Right? It's like, this is what's sacred, we all have to do it this way, right? This is the only true work. Well, no, because Virgo is independence, it's independence. This is the way that you do it, and you do it, and you do it, and I do it, and those should all be different. They should be independent, they should be our own study. But look at this, we got into the shadow, right, of Virgo, and in this opposition to Chiron, the shamanic healing, through the sacred wound, right? And this Pisces energy, this very empathic energy. I mean, it was incredible. So what happened, I wasn't there for it, but about an hour later, after that first kind of outburst took forth, and basically from what I hear, exactly at the time of this solar eclipse in Virgo, the sacred fire, okay, think Virgo there, and think the sun being eclipsed by the moon, the sacred fire was put out with water. All right, this opposition to the water sign Pisces, the water of the moon. The fire had to be put out because from what I understand, the fight ended up getting into a place of what is sacred at a sacred fire and what is not. And I understand the mantra was no booze, no shoes at the sacred fire. Well, it was cold out and people are walking around outside. They want some shoes on, and I can support the no booze thing personally, but it's also a festival. And, those are beautiful sacred rules for a fire, but are they the only sacred rules? right? Or is that one person's opinion or several people's opinion? And so I guess there were a couple different factions on either sides of that argument, and it became so escalated that the fire had to be put out by the water. Now, I love it when there are literal expressions of these planetary alignments in my own personal experience. This is one of the ways that astrology, which I denied for most of my life, proves itself again and again and again. So what was your experience September 12th, September 13th, during that solar eclipse? Was there some shadow around what is sacred for you? Was there some energy of getting into this over-empathic and even kind of martyrdom energy? So another thing that happened at this festival, and I don't want to share too much, but there were a few, well, I think psychotic breaks is the best way to describe this. And this can be a rather chironic kind of thing. And you might expect at a festival, well, that's because people are using psychedelics or whatever. In each of these cases, that was not true. These people were sober. But the way that I feel into this, looking at the chart, in a very kind of Piscean thing, and even a shadow Pisces thing, and a Pisces healing thing, okay? Neptune and Chiron, both great healers in the sign of Pisces healing. In these oppositions, Neptune and Jupiter, right? It's very strong, that. And the solar eclipse to Chiron. It's like these few people were kind of soaking in everyone's energy at the festival. And when we enjoy strong alignments like this on Earth, you know, there's a deep energetic exchange. And in these signs, there's kind of a purging, you know, purging of the sacred wound. And my feeling into this is that there were a few people who kind of took it for the team. And like, okay, you guys are all going through that stuff. Like, we will do this for you. I will take on your sacred room. I will suck the venom from the snake victim's leg and purge it in this kind of thing. But they didn't necessarily perhaps have that training. Or maybe they did, and maybe that was the point of this thing. But there was a lot of challenge to the organizers of the festival that evening, because people, in a sense, were losing their mind, and maybe losing their mind for the collective mind. So this is a very literal energetic exchange for me. Personally, I had a wonderful night, and I wonder if that's because some of these, you know, chironic healers were taking my experience from me. I'm not sure. I think, you know, anticipating this alignment, I said, okay, be in my practice, be in what is sacred for me, connect to the stars, as I certainly did that night. It was beautiful out there. So what was your experience? I think that's a greater question. And how does this participate with Venus through the Crown Gate? Well, again, this Leo point came from Virgo. So are we purging and healing some of the shadow of Virgo so we can fully embrace this new Leo quest? Okay, and Jupiter, who again for me is the representative of the Crown Chakra here at the solar moon, 707 Virgo, in this opposition to retrograde Neptune in Pisces, right? How is the year king in the sign of Virgo also allowing us through this opposition to release some of the old Virgo ways so we can fully embrace Leo now without leaving behind Virgo, right? This is always important. We want to keep the root of that thing, but purge our addictions to it so we can move forward into the new quest. We're seeing that with these retrograde planets in Capricorn, because the last Venus cycle was Capricorn, as I've mentioned. We're seeing this with these strong alignments from the Virgo mysteries, because the historical place that the Leo-Venus quest came from was a Virgo quest. And again, we see Juno, wife to Jupiter, in Virgo at that time too. So perhaps that some of that comes through. And I'm most fascinated by this Jupiter-Neptune opposition, which is the next thing that we will look into, because that is happening tonight. Or on the East Coast, tomorrow, September 17th, Thursday, Jupiter's day. The exact alignment for the West Coast is September 16th, 11:53 or 54 p.m. So you can see that here. Neptune retrograde 7 degrees 58 minutes Pisces, and Jupiter 7 degrees 58 minutes Virgo. The Jupiter-Neptune opposition, which does not come our way very often. I better drink a cup of this Jupiter tea. Now, Gary Caton recently posted a new episode for his Hermetic Astrology podcast about this Jupiter-Neptune opposition. I haven't had the joy of listening to it yet, but I highly recommend that you do. You can go to Gary's website, dreamastrologer.com, or check out the Hermetic Astrology podcast on Facebook. And it's a free listening, at least the first hour of it. And Gary's wisdom about the planetary conversation is something that has very much informed my own. He's a dear brother and a teacher. Maybe you saw that second episode of this 13th Flower Journey where Gary and I speak about the Venus and Mars dance over history. A lot of this research he's brought forth. He's an amazing seeker and keeper of the astrological arts and philosophical and hermetic wisdom. So check that out. I think I'm going to do that as soon as I hit stop here. And we'll have Gary back on very soon, I think maybe more on my podcast, to discuss Mercury Retrograde, which begins tomorrow, because Gary's sharing about Mercury Retrograde practices have become very valuable to me in the experiences of the retrograde Mercury periods that come our way 3 times a year. And the next again begins tomorrow, September 17th. But on this Jupiter-Neptune opposition, all right, I work so devotedly with the moon game that I play, not only to get a better understanding of each archetype by new moon every month, but also because I like to experience that moon cycle, the principal phases of the moon, new moon, first quarter moon, full moon, third quarter moon, as a reflection, as a teaching of these greater cycles like a Jupiter-Neptune cycle. Now the opposition for me in my moon game, which you can read much more about at my website, morethan.astrology.com, there's a moon game tab. For me, the full moon is a time of illumination. All right? It's like a new moon, the seeds are planted. At first quarter moon, they're sprouting. It's a week of tension because now they're exposed to the wind and the rain. They have to deal, in a sense. These strange forces come in to bring tension to those seeds of intention we planted. And then we get to the full moon a week later, and illumination. Now I understand why those tensions were helping me, why they served the intentions I set, even though it was hard to see that when they first came in, that square conversation. It can just feel like we're moving in the other direction. The full moon, moon opposite sun, is the opposition. And I call it illumination because this is the moon in its full brightness, its full illumination. And to, in a sense, take some of the energy out of that word opposition, which can sound so negative. But in a way, opposition, this is sitting on the other side of the table, right, from someone. And oppositions often come to us in the experience of another person kind of reflecting to us as the full moon reflects the sun's light as much as it can, yeah? So here, I would suggest we are entering the Jupiter-Neptune illumination. Okay, so we want to look at where they came from. I'm going to go back to the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which you'll see was some time ago. This is actually on winter solstice, 2009, December 21st, 2009. You can see Jupiter conjunct Neptune here in the sign of Aquarius. And the moon was with them at that time, and Chiron. What an incredible conversation. An opposite Mars. I don't want to get us too lost in that, because that's, we could talk about that forever, and what all the other planets are doing at that time too. Especially Venus in the underworld with the Sun in Sagittarius, traditionally one of Jupiter's signs. But here we have Aquarius, okay? It carries the cosmological, right? Investigation, higher consciousness, collective consciousness, new ways, revolution. All right, so what are they seeding in the ways of revolution? Jupiter and Neptune. Jupiter, the gas giant guru, the conductor of the celestial symphony, our largest planet, so large that all the other planets can fit within his area, his volume. And Neptune, who is like this planetary professor of Pisces school, the celestial healer, a higher realm force of visions and dreams, but also can be confusion and delusion, right? When Jupiter touches anything, it brings serious expansion to it. So how was Aquarius being expanded for us in December of 2009? I mean, in my own experience, this is kind of when I began getting this weird. And the so-called awakening experience was really beginning for me at that time, and was really coming into realization. These Aquarius seeds, this astral intelligence seeds that were planted by this dynamic conjunction between Jupiter and Neptune at that time, really began in my own experience to unfold in the next principal phase of Jupiter and Neptune, Jupiter square Neptune, which came on June 25th, 2012. You can see Jupiter here in the sign of, where are you, Jupiter? In the sign of Gemini. Sorry. Alright, so Gemini, Jupiter, right at the south node, Venus, Ceres. There's a lot always that we can go into these charts. Squaring Pisces, Neptune. Neptune had now ingressed into the sign of Pisces. You can see that Chiron had as well. And their conjunction was winter solstice of 2009. Now they make this square, the beginning of their years of tension in this conversation for the intentions that were seeded in 2009 in Aquarius. June 25th, 2012, very close to summer solstice. I will never forget the weekend that happened just before this in my own path. What a dynamic time. I was not studying astrology at that point, so I was not aware of this, but certainly I experienced that, and I'll leave myself out of it. But you can see also the moon in Virgo at that time. So there was this pretty strong cross happening just for a moment in the mutable signs, Virgo and Pisces, Gemini, and Sagittarius, where the North Node was at that time. So beginning a bit of tension in this conversation between Jupiter and Neptune. Neptune now at home in Pisces, and Jupiter in Gemini. Eternal youth and truth. And one thing I think we could say in this square, this conversation of tension, Jupiter might be saying, hey man, Pisces used to be mine. In the traditional systems, Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces. So I mentioned earlier how Saturn used to rule Capricorn and Aquarius. When Uranus was discovered, it was like, whoa, that cat is fully Aquarius, fully avant-garde and revolutionary. We hand Aquarius to you, Uranus. What's Saturn have to say about that? And when Neptune was discovered in 1846, not long after the astrological community gave Pisces to Neptune. So what's Jupiter have to say about that? Maybe some of that's happening in this conversation. He's like, hey, I'm the guru. I'm the healer. What are you doing taking my sign, Jack? I mean, maybe Mars could have a similar discussion with Pluto, because Mars used to be Aries and Scorpio, but when Pluto was discovered in 1930, we're like, oh, whoa, that Plutonic thing, that's fully Scorpionic, that's yours now. So I often wonder what the traditional planets feel about, in a sense, losing their signs in the astrological study to these new planets, these outer planets. But so what's happening in this Jupiter-Neptune dance since June 25th of 2012, since December 21st of 2009, and in a way it's really reaching illumination at this time now. The Jupiter-Neptune opposition coming our way September 16th or September 17th, depending where you are in the world, in Virgo for Jupiter and Pisces for Neptune retrograde. Yeah. And Jupiter in Virgo, he's talking about, hey, this is what's sacred. Our Dharma this year, the fast lane on the highway to enlightenment this year is about the Virgo mysteries. What is sacred to you? What is your practice? What is your devotion? Right? And in this illumination alignment, maybe saying, hey, actually, you know what? That's cool. You can have Pisces now. Let's do this together. Let's have this conversation about this together. And I mean, I could have a conversation with you about that all day. You did choose the Jupiter Cup after all. But what I would say is that, in an attempt to be brief, that these themes that came our way in September 12th with that Virgo new moon opposite Chiron, this is still very much alive and in a sense supercharged at this time with Jupiter, gas giant guru, in this conversation with Neptune. And there's celestial healing. And what about the Pisces school? How have we fallen into martyrdom? How have we overgiven ourselves in our devotion to spirit? This kind of thing, yeah? And this is a huge conversation of Jupiter, of Crown Chakra, right? How have I been told I am meant to practice my connection to divinity? Have I grown up in that school that says selfless sacrifice is the only way to the heavens and this kind of thing, and that martyrdom? I mean, why carry around a cross if we are not nailed to it? Why die for other sins if maybe that won't work? Should we focus on our own self? Yeah, on our own illumination, our own radiance that I feel Venus is here to check out in her dance through the Leo mysteries during the synodic cycle. So there's a very beautiful part of the conversation coming alive here. And I think I will leave that there for you to meditate upon. And you can see that tonight, Pluto is now retrograding into the 13th degree of Capricorn, 12 degrees, 59 minutes. We call this the 13th degree because there is no 0th degree. So everything from 0 to 1 is the first degree, right? Everything from 29 to 30 is the 29th degree. There is no 30th degree. So this is the 13th degree. Pluto has been hanging out in the 14th degree of Capricorn for some time, and tonight he retrogrades back into this 13th degree. That's a pretty significant shift. A much more significant shift for Pluto is coming our way very soon because he will station direct during the course of this month. But before I get to that, tomorrow, two very significant events. One that, we hear about so strongly in the astrological or so-called communities, Mercury Retrograde. All right, this happens at 11:09 a.m. West Coast time, Thursday, Jupiter's Day, September 17th, 2015. You can see Mercury retrograding here at 15 degrees, 55 minutes Libra, and in near opposition to Uranus, but he won't get to that opposition because he is stationing retrograde. 15 degrees, 55 minutes Libra. So I love that, right? It's like before the nodes leave the sign of Libra, which will happen in November, Mercury, who's done all of his retrogrades, his 3 retrogrades this year and last year, in the air signs, he's like, all right, relationship, diplomacy, peace, right? Let's focus on that. Let's remember the tools around this, and let's look into the past in the sense. So as we reflect on this with Venus and Mars this year, that opportunity to rewrite our relationship to relationship, Mercury is saying what has worked in relationship, what has not worked in relationship, what has worked in communication, what has not worked. And those Mercury retrograde times can stress that stuff. Now, I'm not one to scapegoat a god, as Gary very brilliantly stated this in our conversation for the second episode of this Venus journey, at all. I mean, for me, Mercury is my great god. I am Gemini rising, all right? He rules the deacon of my Aquarius midheaven. He's grand trine from the sign of Libra to those points in my chart, and I will be having a Venus synodic return, which is why I'm devoting myself to Venus now, but also a Mercury synodic return, which comes our way every 6 or 7 years. Mercury has been my time lord according to the ancient Hellenistic study of annual perfections, and I could go deep into the astrobabble, but this is a big time for Mercury and me right now, and it's a big time for all of us when Mercury retrogrades. This is Mercury passing the Earth, getting as close as he can. We're told that do not travel, do not sign contracts, all this superstitious mumbo jumbo. This is not the way to work with the Mercury retrograde. It is time to remember, to reflect these rewords. I love that. But also my practice here is to make a sacrifice to Mercury. Mercury on the first day of his birth created sacrifice. And my work here in dancing along with the Mercury retrograde instead of getting played by it is to make space for Mercury's guidance to come in. And for me, that is, okay, I will give you this and make some room for you to come in. So personally, for this cycle, I've given up desserts because I was eating cake and such like a 8-year-old at a birthday party. And also kind of my deep dive into the rabbit holes of Armageddon theory, which have been far too strong for me over the course of the last month. So I've released that to Mercury and said, please come in as my great guide. And you can learn a lot more about that in a movie that's on my website, morethan.astrology.com. It's called Don't Get Played by Mercury Retrograde. And again, sometime during the cycle, hopefully around September 30th, when Mercury is conjunct the Sun, the interior conjunction, Gary, Caton, and I will record a conversation about his practice and about the wisdom that he's brought forth about the great Hermes. So I look forward to sharing that with you. But what I would say for now is please do not believe everything you read about Mercury retrograde. There's a lot of scapegoating here of Mercury. And why would we scapegoat a god? Or as I've come to say now, a guide. Instead of the gods and goddesses, this last weekend at the festival, I found myself saying the guides and guidesses. And I think this is actually part of me clearing the crown chakra. That there's these old tradition, hey, here are these rulers of us, and without disrespecting the planets, I like to see them as reflections of us, as parts of us, as our brothers, our sisters. And so I'm feeling much more comfortable with this term, the guides and guidesses. And I think it's helping me release some of the old tradition while still honoring them and keeping respect, to have a more intentional, conscious relationship with them instead of just being their subject. I hope that makes sense. Now, on this date of the Mercury retrograde, September 17th, we will also have a little bit later in the day Saturn's ingress into the sign of Sagittarius. I'm going to rewind a few days because if I don't, it might freak the software out when I try to show this exact time, which is September 17th, 2015 at 7:48 p.m. West Coast time. All right, here you can see Saturn in Sag. And Saturn will stay in Sagittarius, I can show you this, until he ingresses into Capricorn, goes home in a sense, on December 19th, 2017. Alright? So this is Saturn in Sag for some time. Saturn spends about 2.5, 3 years in each sign. In fact, he left Scorpio to enter Sagittarius on December 23rd, 2014. But on March 14th, 2015, Saturn stationed retrograde around 6 degrees of Sag, diving back to the Scorpio school for some unfinished business. On June 14th, he went back into Scorpio, went direct. Oh, I'm sorry to say I am forgetting that date right now. But either way, it is tomorrow, September 17th, when Saturn returns to Sag to stay until almost 2018. And this is a huge deal, and I love that this is happening during Venus's descent through the Crown Chakra Gate. Alright? Because Saturn in many ways is the rules. Coming in from authority figures very often, and sometimes the obstacles from us that would keep us from achieving the highest essence of an archetype. But for me, when Saturn moves through alignments to our own personal planets, transits, or Saturn moving through a sign, it gives us the opportunity to rewrite the rules. And rewriting the rules of Sagittarius, okay, very crown chakra, traditionally associated with Jupiter, again, my correlation to the crown chakra. Sagittarius is that seeking nature. It is that philosophy, that asking these questions that are so great because they can't be answered by anything but greater questions. Yeah, why? Why do things die? Why are there seasons? What are we doing here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? This kind of thing. Yeah, and Saturn in Sagittarius during the course of the rest of this Venus cycle is going to give us the chance to rewrite the rules that we were taught about what spiritual seeking is. So we can have a new vision quest. And so I love that this is happening during this Venus Crown Gate month. And during the next month, well, really pretty much beginning this month, when Venus moves into the sign of Virgo, she will begin her square to Saturn. A third quarter square, though, like a third quarter moon. So there is tension in any square, but in my moon game, that is the time of wisdom. You see, so it's like a first quarter square because there is tension, but this is all the way, or 3/4 of the way through the cycle. So the tension in here is the wisdom from the illumination has come forth. Now can I eat that fruit that has grown in the tree and leave the seeds so a new tree can be planted? So the tension for me, I think, is like, oh, I got this. Now can I release it so I can begin again? Before I jump to Venus in Virgo and her ingress into that sign, which happens just before the next moon gate, I want to say that this, on this day that Mercury stations retrograde and Saturn enters the sign of Sagittarius, we also see Juno entering the sign of Virgo. We rewind a few days to make sure the software doesn't give us a glitch and show you that. You're right, that happened anyway. Sorry, I said Juno goes into the sign of Virgo, but she's actually leaving the sign of Virgo to enter the sign of Libra, September 17th, 2:57 a.m. So this is actually the first of the Jupiter's Day, Thursday, September 17th activities. First, Juno, goddess of relationship, ingresses into the sign of Libra and coming very close to that North Node conjunction, which you can see is now in the 1st degree of Libra. It's about to leave Libra on November 11th. So Juno ingresses into Libra, which is a very resonant archetype with her mysteries, relationship. Mercury retrogrades in the sign of Libra. Let's review relationship while this whole Venus-Mars dance is going down. Then Saturn enters Sagittarius, all tomorrow, September 17th, 2015, with the Jupiter-Neptune opposition coming just an hour before all that. It is a huge time astrologically, and that's why this video is gearing up to be like 1,000,000 hours long. My apologies for that. If you've made it this far, my assumption is that you are enjoying that, and thanks for watching. Now, I'm very interested in when Juno will conjunct the North Node, and let's see when that goes down here. She's actually going to go, oh no, sorry. It looks like that's September 19th. Yeah. Let's see, cruise through by the hours here. 1 degree, 1 minute Libra. How's that for balance? September 19th, this Saturday or Saturn's Day, 5:57 or thereabout p.m. Juno conjunct the North Node in Libra. Conversations of relationship with the Sun, with Mercury now retrograde in Libra. And of course, not long after this, we have the Sun ingressing into the sign of Libra. And what does that mean? That means autumn equinox. This comes our way September 23rd, 1:20 a.m. is the exact time of this ingress of Sun to the autumnal equinox point, the place of balance, equal days, equal nights. Sometimes a little more favorable at vernal equinox because now days are getting longer, and of course autumn equinox means we're shifting into autumn, we're shifting into fall, we're falling towards the darkness, the Sun is falling from its height as it was in summer solstice, right, in June, and now it's got to that point of equal days and night, and we are heading into the darkness, heading towards winter. And the rain will soon come our way pretty steadily here in Seattle, Washington. But look at that. This autumnal equinox, September 23rd, features the node and Juno all together. There's a huge Libra focus, and again, Mercury retrograde in Libra, and this Venus-Mars dance. There are 3 conjunctions this year. Wow. Relationship, communication, diplomacy, peace. Peace. I am experiencing peace. I am at peace. I am peace. A prayer I once read in a wonderful book called Praying with Power by Jose Luis Stevens of the Power Path Shaman School. I really highly suggest you pick up a copy of Praying with Power by Jose Luis Stevens, especially with Jupiter spending his year king in Virgo, because we are asked about prayer now. What does that mean to you? And what another wonderful word to dance with as we're talking about releasing the clutter from the crown chakra. Prayer. Is that just for the religious, for the, the church? Or is there a power of prayer? Is there an old shamanic sense of prayer? So for the 3rd time, Praying with Power by Jose Luis Stevens. Kind of hard to find these days because I believe it's out of print. But if you can find a copy, pick that up. It is an amazing book, and I feel like it can be a very beautiful guide for us all at this time. I am experiencing peace. I am at peace. I am peace. So how wonderful a thing for me to have sacrificed my addiction to Armageddon theories before September 23rd comes our way, and I will leave that at that and for your own study if you choose to engage in that rabbit hole. The very next day, Pluto stations direct. September 24th, 11:57 p.m. in the 13th degree of Capricorn, 12 degrees 58 minutes Capricorn. I believe this is in beautiful participation with this chakra gate, this crown chakra gate, And I wanted to read you the Sabian symbol for that degree of the zodiac, the 23rd degree. I'm sorry, the 13th degree of Capricorn. Now the 14th degree, where Pluto has been hanging out for some time, is my favorite. That is an ancient bas-relief carved in granite, remains a witness to a long-forgotten culture. What a beautiful Capricorn statement. What are the ways of the elders? What are the ways of the ancients? What are the ways of the records? Yeah. And such a beautiful statement for Venus's last quest through the Capricorn mysteries. But now she enters the Leo mysteries, yeah? And how can Pluto's station at this degree of the zodiac reflect her intents here? Well, the 13th degree of Capricorn reads like this. A fire worshipper meditates on the ultimate realities of existence. The fire worshipper meditating on the ultimate realities of existence. What a Jupiter thing! What a Sagittarius thing! So with Saturn now having ingressed into Sagittarius, giving us an opportunity to rewrite the rules around the way the fire worshipper seeks and meditates, as Venus is releasing that crown chakra. Yeah, so much expression here. And you can see that Mars has ingressed into Virgo, all right, on this same day. So much is happening this week. Perhaps the most significant being the blood moon on September 27th, 2015. The exact alignment of the total lunar eclipse is 7:50 p.m. here on the West Coast. The sun close to the autumnal equinox point, 4 degrees, 40 minutes Libra. You can see Mercury Retrograde there at about 10 degrees Libra at the time. Juno in the underworld, very close to the sun, which is at the North Node, very close to the North Node and therefore an eclipse. And of course opposite the moon, because that's full moon and total lunar eclipse. Moon at the South Node in Aries, and Vesta, the keeper of the sacred flame, still retrograde in Aries at the time. So this is a very strong conversation going down between many planetary players, and it is the 4th blood moon of this tetrad, 4 total lunar eclipses in a row. They were April 15th, 2014, August 23rd, 2014, April 4th, 2015, and now September 27th, 2015. When the moon rises at sunset, it always happens on a full moon, right? On September 27th, a Sunday, the day of the sun, it will already be partially eclipsed. And the total eclipse, again, 7:50 p.m. here on the West Coast. That's the time of the complete blood moon, the moon being turned red, the sunset and sunrises of the Earth being projected onto the lunar surface. So this is something to get out there and watch with your eyes. This is going to be quite special. And it's a super moon, the moon at perigee, as close as it gets to the Earth in its orbit, when it can appear up to 14% larger than other full moons, and a blood moon, a total lunar eclipse. So you can search blood moon tetrad online and hear all sorts of things about the last couple of years and these eclipses. Be careful when you open that rabbit hole. You're going to find a lot of crazy prophecy and such, but it's an interesting study for those of you who are called. What is a lunar eclipse, a blood moon? I mean, this is the shadow of the Earth, right? Hiding the moon from our view. So as we're talking the moon in Aries, we're asked to enter the shadow of Aries, the moon at the South Node, the past, what can we release in the ways of Aries shadow, all right? I mean, that warrior, protector energy, that deep independence, even the scar tissue, the armor over the heart that would keep us from moving into peace, Libra, into relationship, Libra, the sacred flame, calling us into this energy of releasing that shadow so we can connect to North Node, relationship, right? We're the shadows of the relationship. This is Juno in the underworld. Mercury Retrograde calling us back to relationship, unseen, approaching his September 30th conjunction to the Sun. Where does this align in your chart? What do you have around 5 degrees Aries or 5 degrees Libra? Or 5 degrees Capricorn or Cancer, where this blood moon will be squaring? This is a very important energy this month, and during this month of Venus clearing the crown chakra to move down right towards the heart, towards the root, into her reassemblage. And look at Venus at this time in a very strong grand fire trine to Pallas Athena, wisdom in Sagittarius, seeking, to Uranus conjunct Eris in Aries, revolution of the nature of discord. What can we release from the past pains of partnerships that have plagued us so that we can move into a new way of peace and relationship? The Mercury Sun interior conjunction, a very significant point of the Mercury retrograde cycle, when Mercury is just between Earth and Sun, comes to us on September 30th, 7:37 a.m. West Coast, and you can see these very strong alignments, Juno, Sun, Mercury retrograde at that time. Again, I'm hoping to bring Gary Caton back for a conversation about Mercury then, and you can watch the Don't Get Played by Mercury Retrograde movie on my website, morethan.astrology.com, to check that out. Here's some more information about how you can participate with this Mercury retrograde cycle. But this is a very important moment of that September 30th. And Gary and I will talk about September 3rd, September 30th, and August 15th as very important parts of the Mercury cycle. The September 3rd and October 15th dates are not Mercury retrograde, so we will decode that mystery at that time. Now, before Venus finds her way to the descent through the next gate, the third eye gate, she will first ingress into the sign of Virgo. And this alignment, or this ingress, comes our way on October 8th at 10:29 a.m. West Coast time. You can see Venus here in Virgo, and you can see how close the moon is. This is just before the next moon-Venus conjunction, Inanna's descent through the third eye gate. And you can see this whole Virgo planet party that is forming for us now. Mercury is still retrograde, and now has at that point, and basically at that point, is conjunct the North Node, really bringing this focus into relationship. Juno in Libra as well, Sun in Libra as well, and we'll get into some of the alignments that will happen in the Libra mysteries moving forward, but I'm really interested in this Virgo planet party. Okay, so this is October 8th, 10:28 a.m. It's the same day that we have the next Venus moon gate, right? So now the descent into the month-long study of the third eye. And for me, the planetary association is the moon, the light that changes, yeah? The secretions of the night when we sleep and dream. So I will show you that gate, which comes our way on October 8th at 1 o'clock p.m. But it's that morning, right, when Venus and the moon rise together. I'll shift this back to a house system that reflects the eastern horizon. We'll do Porphyros. So this morning here, October 8th, 4 a.m., this is a very close Moon-Venus conjunction. You can see that she's still in the sign of Leo at that point, but the exact conjunction will be after Venus ingresses into Virgo. But look at this beauty, okay? It'll be Moon and Venus together, and then Mars and Jupiter together. So very soon after 1 p.m., we have that Moon-Venus conjunction in Virgo. You can see how close the Mars-Jupiter conjunction is getting. Mars now in opposition to Neptune. And during the course of the 6th gate, all right, 2nd gate, whatever we want to call it, the third eye chakra gate, that study, all right, we're going to have some amazing alignments. Venus square Saturn, all right, and Venus conjunct Mars, that one coming our way on November 2nd, and before that, Venus conjunct Jupiter on October 25th. Mars conjunct Jupiter, which I think is October 17th or 19th, maybe 16th. Well, for the record, let's clear that one up. That would be October 17th, yeah. But again, that's all in next month's study, in the third eye gate. So this is the month of releasing the crown. I hope some of this astrological insight, for those of you who speak the language or are learning the language, helps guide this process. You know, what does that Virgo solar eclipse opposite Chiron do to participate with removing the clutter of the crown? What about Mercury Retrograde, Juno ingressing into Libra, conjunct the North Node, Saturn ingressing into Sagittarius, Pluto stationing direct, Venus ingressing into Virgo, right? Her second sign in this Leo synodic cycle study, right? And next month we'll get to look at these very powerful alignments from the Virgo mystery school. The last thing I want to share is this beautiful image of the crown chakra. I'll show you my version here, but then put it up on the screen. This was painted by Aloria Weaver, and this is one of the great gifts that Spirit brought to me for the Crown Chakra Gate on September 10th. I got a message from Elijah Parker, a dear friend who you will certainly hear an interview from during the course of this 13th flower journey. Perhaps several, because he's a fascinating wisdom keeper. And you've seen some of Elijah's videos as Subliminal Phoenix in the 13th Flower episodes during the Anana StarryTellings. I've shown a lot of his chakra videos, right? But I got a message from Elijah saying, I've got some friends passing through Seattle. Can they stay with you? And this was Aloria Weaver, whose chakra art I was just looking at all day, because her images of these chakras are my favorite. And Aloria and David Haskins, who is her husband and her painting partner, were coming through town. And so they stayed here, we drank tea, and I stayed up all night editing the 4th episode, The Conversation with Tammy Brunk, and then I went out to see the Venus-Moon gate, and the Venus-Moon-Mars conjunction, and that heliacal rise of Jupiter. And when I came home, I went to sleep, and when I woke up, they had left to move along their way, but I woke up to these wonderful gifts, these great stickers of the crown chakra and the heart chakra, and I plan to pick up the rest. And when I saw Aloria at this festival last weekend, I bought some banners of her chakra art, which you can do at aloriaweaver.com. Meditating just on the images of these chakras can really help bring a resonance with us, an understanding to us of their energies. What do we need to release from the crown so we can move into this place of reassemblage, of rebirth? So I will leave you here staring at this beautiful image by Aloria Weaver of the crown chakra, and leave you with my love and gratitude. Thank you for watching. Planets, I will see you in space. Jupiter T.